Hello and welcome back to our Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky 1 playthrough. In our last episode we made our way down from the tower where Grandpa got doubly kidnapped from. Redhead Cloud went nuts and collapsed. We ran across Zin, Eastern Beefcake guy. We ran across him. He carried Redhead Cloud back to the town, where we discovered that he'd been poisoned by the bullet that hit him instead of Tita. The doctor had no idea how to cure him, so he went to the church, learned about this marvellous moss, went and got said marvellous moss, and it appears to have cured Red-haired Cloud. But, yes, anyway. Zin's gone back to his hometown and invited us to follow eventually. But for now, we're going into the guild to see if they've learned anything more about Grandpa's kidnapping. So, in we go. Estelle says, "Morning, Kellica." Joshua says, "Good morning." Kellica says, "And to you both. Has Zin already left?" Did I say Zin? It might have been Zan. Zin, Zan, Zigzag, Bert and Barry, Simon and Garfunkel. Anyway, Joshua says, "Yes, he took an airliner to Grunsel some time ago." Estelle says, "I wish you could have come to see him off. Speaking of which, do you two know each other somehow?" Kellica replies, "A bit, quite some time ago. But that's beside the point. Have you noticed the strange current in the air? The winds are shifting." Estelle says, "Hey, no changing the subject." Wait, we are talking about the weather, aren't we? Joshua asks, "Have you learned something about that airship?" Kellica says, "Not a thing. But I believe this disquieting atmosphere is related to the Royal Army mobilizing. One thing, I've sent a message to the Army headquarters at Leiston Fortress, but there's been no response. Secondly, all the mandatory inspections throughout the kingdom have been lifted." Estelle asks, "What? What's that all about? This isn't about another turf war like with the Sky Pirates, is it?" Joshua says, "No, it would be strange for them to call off inspections if that were the case. If they had caught the culprits themselves, surely they would have sent word around. Maybe there is something in the air." Kellica says, "Incidentally, I've not been able to contact the intelligence division at Leiston Fortress either. It is possible that the Royal Army has some sort of internal issue going on." Estelle says, "Some sort of... Oh wait, the stuff that Dorothy shot." Joshua says, "The picture of those guys in black wearing the Royal Guard uniforms." Dorothy asks, "Someone mentioned my name?" Estelle says, "Dorothy." Joshua says, "Speak of the devil, and yea, verily." Dorothy says, "Wow, what an ordeal. I finally got in touch with my editor's office, and Niall happened to be there. When I told him about giving up my photo cords to the army, he just about blew his stack. So unfair." Estelle asks, "Which means they haven't given it back yet?" Dorothy says, "Right. I mean, how rude is that? And after I'd gone to the trouble of going to Leiston Fortress to get it back too." Estelle says, "Wow, you've got some fire to you." Dorothy laughs. "Well, I guess I have to have one redeeming trait, right? Anyway, I didn't have any other option but to just take a picture of the fort for the paper. It does make for a great shot, though. It lights up all pretty at night." Estelle says, "You took a pretty picture of the fort." Joshua says, "Not to mention you're supposed to obtain permission to photograph any part of a military installation." Dorothy says, "Come on, it's not like it's that big a deal. Here, take a look. I just developed it." Dorothy placed the photo on the counter. Joshua says, hey, this is a pretty nice shot. So this is Leiston Fortress. Estelle says, wow, Dorothy, you've really got a good eye for this. Wait a sec. Joshua asks, what's wrong, Estelle? Estelle says, it might just be my imagination, but do you see anything there at the top right? Joshua says, what? You're right. Killiker says, it's not very clear, but there's definitely a small shadow there. Dorothy whistles, you've got a sharp eye, Estelle. I mean, I took the picture and I didn't notice that at all. Estelle laughs, well, what can I say? Well, it is just a silhouette. Maybe it's an army ship. Joshua says, no, that's no guard ship. This is that small airship from before. Estelle says, before? Killiker says, it's the same silhouette as the ship that the professor was taken away in. How does she know that? Anyway, Joshua says, right. Estelle says, Wait, what? Estelle says, hold on just 1 second. Why would that ship be anywhere near here? This is a Royal Army installation, isn't it? Joshua says, calm down, Estelle. There are plenty of possibilities to consider before we go jumping to conclusions. Maybe we should go to Leiston Fortress and ask what this is all about. Estelle asks, what? Killiker says, I see. You intend to put it to them directly. Provoke a response, perhaps? Joshua asks, do you think that would be a bad idea? Killiker says, not at all. You have my authorization. This has the potential to be a huge disaster. Whatever might be going on there, this matter must be handled delicately. Estelle says, eesh, you're starting to scare me, Killiker. But you're probably right. We have to handle this very carefully. Hey Dorothy, can we have a copy of this picture? Dorothy says, sure. After all, you guys have done a lot for me. Estelle says, thanks, I owe you one. We have received Dorothy's photograph. Killiker says, if you intend to go to Leiston Fortress, you'll need to leave via the east entrance and take the Ritter Roadway. When you reach the three-way fork in the road, stay on the northern fork and you'll eventually wind up in front of the fort's main gate. Please use the utmost caution. Estelle says, roger that. Joshua says, acknowledged. Well, off we go then. We do have a new Ritter Road monster. The client is the Braces Guild. It pays 3,000 monies. The difficulty is medium. A ferocious monster known as a Bloody Saber has been spotted roving the Ritter Roadway. Braces from this branch are requested to deal with this threat immediately. Oh, well, that was close. Oh, ow. Gee, that's very not nice. Alright, the Bloody Saber has 2,450 HP. It is weak to water and wind magic. It doesn't drop anything. A wild war machine that wanders in search of blood, recovers by draining prey. And the solid dozers have 1,380 HP, not weak to any particular element. Don't drop anything. A monster trained to attack, has high defense and agility, uses an attack that slows foes. As you do. Boy, that was fortunate. That was, yes, that was very fortunate. Ow! Go us. All right. On we go then. To the north. Oh, caution. Warning, military property ahead. Okay. We found a reviving bar. It's empty. Heinous. Yeah, that wasn't nice.
Finished. All right, we're good to go.
You got a leathery tail and a curative horn. And we've got an EP Charge EX. Wow, it can't fly me. Estelle says, "Wow, check out the size of this base. It's got to be several times as big as the Harkin Gate, don't you think?" Joshua says, "Yeah, you may be right. It was apparently the primary base of the counter-offensive in the war 10 years ago." Estelle says, "Oh, okay. That's pretty impressive. Well, let's go inside and see if we can talk to whoever's in charge." Joshua gapes. Estelle says, "What is it?" Joshua says, "Nothing. It's just that you're not acting like your usual timid self. You're starting to remind me of Dad." Estelle sighs. "Oh, come on. It's not like I'm not nervous. But after General Morgan, how bad can it be?" Joshua laughs. "I guess you're right. I wonder if he's still at the Harkin Gate." Estelle says, there's no one here." Joshua says, "That's strange. There's usually a gatekeeper outside at least." The man's voice says, "Identify yourselves." Estelle asks, "Where'd that come from?" Joshua says, "Probably a speaker." The man's voice says, "This is Leiston Fortress, HQ of LaBelle's Royal Armed Forces. This place is off limits to civilians. I'm afraid you're going to have to leave." Estelle whispers, "They sound polite, but..." Joshua whispers back, "Yeah, I think they're just being extra cautious." The man's voice sighs, "Can you two hear me?" Estelle says, "Sorry, but we're not civilians. We're from the Bracers Guild." Joshua says, "We're here to discuss the matter of the central lab being attacked. Could we please speak with the individual in charge?" The man's voice asks, "Are you actual Bracers then?" Estelle says, "If you don't believe us, you can inspect our emblems. You can see them, right?" The man's voice says, "Indeed, you appear to be the genuine article. However, I regret to inform you that the CEO of this base is currently away. Perhaps you can come back another day." Estelle asks, "No commanding officer? Well, that sounds sloppy." Joshua says, "In that case, anyone from the intelligence division will be fine. We have information that must go to either Colonel Richard or Captain Amalthair." The man's voice says, "Very well, wait there." Estelle says, "Wow, it's like pulling teeth with these guys." Joshua says, "Yeah, I wasn't expecting security to be quite this tight here." Estelle says, "Whoa." Joshua says, "Well, someone's here at least." Major Sid. Doesn't look much like Sid. Anyway, Major Sid says, "Please forgive me for making you wait. I am Major Sid, Garrison Commander of Leiston Fortress." Estelle says, "I'm Estelle Bright of the Bracers Guild." Joshua says, "And I'm Joshua Bright, also of the Bracers Guild." Could you not just introduce each other? Major Sid asks, "Bright." Estelle asks, "Is something wrong?" Major Sid says, "Nothing. Pardon me. On to business. You mentioned the attack on the central labs." I'm very sorry, but no one from the intelligence division is currently here. If you'd have a message, I can deliver it for you. Estelle says, that could be a problem. She then whispers, okay, time to shake things up. We have a lead on an airship tied to the crime. Estelle sighs, and here we found a lead on the airship that took away the professor. Major Sid asks, you what? Estelle asks, what? Why do you look so surprised, Major? Major Sid says, oh, it's nothing. We've just been searching for it too. So what is this lead anyway? Joshua says, take a look at this. And we handed over Dorothy's photograph. Major Sid says, this is Leiston Fortress, isn't it? How did you get this picture? Estelle says, now, no need to get worked up. Look at the top right corner of that picture. Major Sid says, let's see. What the? Joshua said, that's obviously not the silhouette of a military patrol ship, is it? Estelle says, and it's the spitting image of the airship that took away the professor. Major Sid said, indeed, this is a grave matter. Thank you for your cooperation. I'll send a report to the intelligence division straight away. Estelle says, huh? Hey, wait a minute, is that it? Major Sid asks, is what it? Estelle says, I mean, don't you think this is weird? Why would the suspect's ship be hanging around here? Major Sid says, it's embarrassing to admit, but I'm afraid that it's entirely my fault. We've been aggressively searching along the border, so security wasn't as tight at home as it should have been then. And if this airship fled to the north, it's possible that this whole matter may have been a plot by the Empire. Estelle asks, really? Joshua squints. Joshua says, I'd like to know just one thing. Where exactly are all of the intelligence personnel right now? Major Sid says, that's classified. I'm sorry, I can't say more. And he goes back into the fort. Bill says, okay now, maybe it's just me, but don't you think all this kind of smells a little funny? Joshua says, I know, but without any concrete evidence, pursuing this lead won't do us any good. Estelle says, yeah. Okay, one of the gates says, paused halfway closed. Estelle says, huh? Joshua says, what the? Major Sid asks, what? Why did it stop short? What? Did that phenomenon start up again? Estelle whispers, Joshua, that's... Joshua whispers back, yeah, I think that's exactly what we needed. Major Sid comes back out and says, it seems I've let you see us at our worst. It looks like the gate mechanism isn't in the best of conditions. Joshua says, indeed, that's a real problem. Estelle suggests maybe you could get some folks from the central labs out to repair it. I'll bet that someone like Professor Russell could have it good as new in no time flat. Major Sid says, yes, I'll keep that in mind. You two maintain post here until it's back in working order. Be sure to keep any careless civilians away. The sentry says, sir, yes, sir. Sentry 2 says, understood, sir. Major Sid says, that said, you two can be on your way. I'll be certain to take that photograph to intelligence. Now, if you'll pardon me. And he goes back into the fortress again. You sure can't just move in? Sentry 1 says, you heard the man, this area's off limits. Sentry 2 says, be on your way, but we're not. I thought we'd established we weren't civilians, but anyway. Back we go. Estelle says, somehow I find it hard to believe a word that guy said, especially if that little malfunction we just saw is what I think it is. Joshua says, yes, it was probably that same phenomenon. Estelle says, which would mean the professor is being held prisoner inside. Joshua whispers, shh, Estelle, this isn't the place to be discussing that. Estelle says, okay. Joshua says, for now, let's get back to Zeiss and see what Killiker has to say. If we have the chance, we can call for the lab chief. And we have returned to the Zeiss Bracers Guild. Factory Chief Murdoch says, I just can't believe that Professor Russell is at Leiston Fortress. Are you absolutely certain? Killiker says, Miss Dorothy's photograph and the shutdown of all power in the gate. These two things combined make the conclusion inescapable. Factory Chief Murdoch says, but the Central Factory and the Royal Army have always had excellent relations. And now I'm expected to believe this. Joshua says, it's not as if the internal command structure of the military is all run by a single entity. The people who attacked the factory were seen escaping, and they looked like Royal Guardsmen. That in itself is a clue. Estelle says, oh, and that would mean... the Royal Guardsmen are behind the whole thing? Joshua says, well, it's not outside the realms of possibility, but I think it's more likely that there's been some kind of frame-up. Maybe some form of internal conspiracy within the Royal Army. Factory Chief Murdoch says, this is unpleasant to think about. But how could the professor get caught up in something like this? Agate says, sounds like you found a lead on our friendly neighborhood criminals. Estelle says, what? Agate? Joshua says, good to see you back on your feet. Agate says, yeah, I just woke up a few minutes ago. It was a little weird waking up in a strange place after being put to bed like some baby. Estelle says, oh, for the love of... Everyone was worried about you, all right? Joshua asks, are you sure you're okay with moving around so soon? Agate says, yeah, sleeping so damn much didn't give me any other option than to recover. I'm feeling pretty much back to normal. Tita says, but Agate, you should probably rest some more. You just got the poison out of your system and the doctor said... Agate says, I just said I'm fine. I've been training for years. It's not that rough on someone like me. Tita starts crying. Agate says, all right, I get it. I won't overdo it or anything until I'm back to normal. That cool with you? Tita says, okay. Agate says, damn kids. Estelle laughs. Even the mighty Agate is no match for Tita. Joshua says, I guess it's hard to say no to someone who's kept a constant vigil over you and nursed you back to health. Agate sighs, shut up. Getting back to the point, it looks like a lot's been going on while I've been out of commission. Mind filling me in on the details? Estelle says, sure. Estelle explained that all signs pointed to Professor Russell being held captive at Leiston Fortress. Tita says, I still can't believe that Grandpa's in there. Agate says, I wouldn't have thought those goons in the black clothes were army types either. And suddenly I'm feeling better than ever. So we go and settle our debts right now. Estelle asks, settle our debts? Agate says, ain't it obvious? We sneak into Leiston Fortress. We'll bust the prof out and they'll never know what hit him. Estelle says, okay, like settling everything in one big stroke. Killiker says, I'm afraid it's not that simple. Estelle asks, huh? Killiker says the Braces Guild has a long-standing policy of non-intervention when it comes to a nation's military. Article 3 of the Guild Code says braces and non-involvement in military or political matters. A bracer will recognize a nation's sovereignty and may not interfere with or arrest any person of national, military or political standing. Or to put it more simply, as long as the army is playing dumb about this, our hands are tied. Agate says, "Oh, you've got to be kidding." Estelle frowns. "No way, that doesn't make sense. You mean that we could witness a crime, but if it's done by a soldier or a politician, we just have to pretend we didn't see anything?" Killiker replies, "Essentially yes. There is, however, a loophole. Article 2 of the Guild Code, braces and their duty to the people. In the event of unjust imperilment of citizens, a bracer's sworn duty is to bear the responsibility for the citizens' safety. Do you understand the significance of this?" Joshua says, "I see. The professor's not a politician or a soldier. He's a civilian whom we're sworn to protect." Estelle says, "So then..." Killiker says, "The rest hinges upon you, Mr. Murdoch. In this case, we are obligated to oppose the Royal Army and save Professor Russell. Will you help us?" Factory Chief Murdoch says, "Stupid question. The factory needs him. Hell, all of LaBelle needs him. Go and get him." Tita says, "Mr. Murdoch, thank you. Factory Chief Murdoch says, "No need to thank me. I owe Professor Russell for all he's taught me." Killiker says, "And so we have adequate justification to proceed." Braces Agate, Estelle and Joshua. "You are hereby ordered to proceed to Leiston Fortress and rescue Professor Russell. It is not as above board as you may be accustomed to, but it is the request of the Braces Guild nevertheless." Estelle says, "Now you're talking." Joshua says, "Acknowledged." Agate says, "Bring it on. If we're doing this, we have to figure out how we're getting in there. Leiston Fortress is pretty damn famous for being impossible to break into." Joshua says, "That's true. It's easy to say we're going to do it, but putting it into practice is going to take some serious planning. There has to be some way of getting inside." Killiker says, "Unfortunately, the security there is nigh unto perfect. Approaching from the lake would likely be impossible since it's monitored by a network of orbital sensors." Agate says, "I figured as much." Joshua says, "And a frontal assault would be tantamount to suicide." Estelle says, "Hey, Mr. Murdoch, you know that orange airship that goes to Leiston Fortress?" Factory Chief Murdoch says, "Yes, that's the Lime. It makes periodic stops to inspect the equipment at the port to make sure it's performing properly." Estelle asks, "Is there any way we could sneak into the fortress on it?" Factory Chief Murdoch says, "No, all of the crew members go through a thorough security check as soon as they land. It'd be impossible to just sneak away." Agate asks, "How about stowing away in the cargo?" Factory Chief Murdoch replies, "No good. Each container is scanned with a biosensor for living creatures, and they check each and every one. Plus, those sensors were designed by Professor Russell himself. They can even pick up one little mouse in a huge mass of stuff." Estelle says, well damn." Tita says, "Oh." Estelle asks, "What is it, sweetie?" Tita asks, "Don't you remember? Grandpa's invention from when I was showing you around." Estelle says, "Let me think. Aha!" Joshua says, "When we were helping with the experiments on a new type of orbment, right?" Tita says, "Yeah. It produces a force field that can disrupt the biosensors. We've already tested that it works, so everything will be fine." Agate asks, "Really?" Factory Chief Murdoch says, "I had no idea the professor had ever made anything like that. Where is this device then?" Tita says, "I guess it must be right where he left it, in his laboratory." Killiker says, "Then we have no time to lose. Hurry and retrieve this device." In the meantime, I will gather and collate whatever data I can on Leiston Fortress. Agate says, got it, thanks. Killiker says, I'll leave the arrangement of a delivery via the Leeb to you, Mr. Murdoch. Factory Chief Murdoch says, alright, I'll talk to Gustav. Just come to the airfield when you're ready. We have reported the results for the Retroroad Monster 2. We received 3,000 monies and 6 BP, and we stay as Junior Bracer 4th class. Killiker says, welcome back. It looks like you finished your job. If you hear any other contracts, make sure you come here and report it. Well, before we go and see Grandy's thing, let's go see if we can hand in these shoes, which were made for walking. Estelle says, hi there, Terry. Done plenty of walking. Terry says, oh, thank you. If you'll just let me examine the shoes for a moment. Impressive. The soles are extremely worn down. It looks like I selected poor materials in its making. Yes, I'd call the test a huge success. Estelle says, ooh, that's a relief. I was afraid you were going to say that you needed us to do more walking. Tita laughs, thank goodness. Terry asks, so there were no problems? No sudden slips or the material going rigid? Estelle says, nope, it all went fine. They fit great and were as comfortable as a worn-out old pair of shoes. True Stragers through and through. Terry says, ah yes, you're a big fan of the Strager brand. Perhaps I should give you a gift then. Since you exceeded my expectations in the test, I'll give you an equivalent bonus. We have received the Beta Strager. Estelle asks, are these what I think they are? Terry says, they're a reference copy of a new product line. It hasn't been announced yet, but they should soon be available in stores. Joshua asks, are you sure it's okay for us to have these? Terry says, yes, we've already passed this phase of development, so I don't need them anymore. I'd rather they be on the feet of someone who can appreciate their true value. Estelle says, wow, thank you. We got to help with development and got a brand new pair of pre-production sneakers in the process. Best job ever! Terry laughs. My sentiments exactly. Thanks to your efforts in testing, my research results are sure to be certified. Estelle says, good luck with your work. I can't wait to see the next new product. Terry says, yes, I'll be reporting these results to my boss right away. Joshua says, thanks for everything. Estelle says, see you later. And we have completed the product testing quest. $35 to $151. Tina can have the craft shoes then. Alright, Grandy's lab. Lance says the orbital guns I'm currently working on are poorly balanced and incredibly hard to use. But if I could get them onto the market, they'd be a bestseller for sure. Performance versus usability. A difficult choice. May as well try for both. Alright. Try the 5th floor then. Yes, 5th floor. Supervisor Trevor says, "Greetings, Braces. I've heard from Murdoch. Well, I haven't heard everything, but it's time for the rescue. I'll be waiting for the safe return of both the Professor and the Capel. Do your best. May Eidos watch over you all." Yeah. Okay. Whatever you reckon, pal. Where did we test them? In the archives. There's office. House. Estelle asks, "Now where is that thing? It's got to be here somewhere." Tita says, maybe in a corner of the lab or the 2nd floor archives. Those are where Grandpa usually tosses stuff from his old inventions. Agate says, "Eccentric old coot. But whatever, let's just find the damn thing." Let's start up here. Estelle says, "Found it." Joshua says, "That's the orbment that was in our experiment, all right. So, can we use it?" Tita says, "I think so. If everything performs to specs, then it'll keep a biosensor from working right. We found the detector jammer." Agate says, "All right, back to the guild then. Killick probably finished collecting intel on Fort Leiston by now." Back to the guild we go then. $160 monies. Daylight robbery. What do you do? Make the sheets out of gold? Estelle says, "We're back, Kelliker, and we have the device." Kelliker says, "I've also finished my preparations. Now, what I am about to show you is not to be spoken of to anyone else. We have received the Leiston Fortress map." Agate says, "Well, would you look at that?" Joshua asks, "These are the schematics for Leiston Fortress?" Tita says, "Wow, it sure is big. And Grandpa's in there somewhere." Estelle asks, Isn't the layout of the fort a military secret? How'd the guild get its hands on it?" Killiker says, the Guild has ways of obtaining information. It's best that you not know. The Braces Guild is a much more complex organisation than it may appear, and you'll do well to remember that. Estelle says, okay. Killiker says, I don't think I need to remind you that this is an exceptionally unique case. Relations between the army and the Guild have traditionally been excellent in Aberon, even relative to other surrounding nations. It is absolutely crucial that we not cause any ill will. The Guild can ill afford hostilities with the army. Do I make myself clear, Agate? Agate says, yeah, I guess. But if I see the men in black clothes, they're going to have a hot date with the business end of my sword. Soldiers or not, I've been looking for them so long that I think they'd be offended if I didn't kick their asses. Killiker says, do what you must. I just ask that you take no lives. Estelle and Joshua. Legally, I should not entrust a task like this to junior bracers. Estelle says, well, wait a second. I don't like what you're driving at. Joshua says, we're already part of this. Please allow us to see it through to the end. Killiker says, I thought you might say that, and I don't intend to stand in your way. But it must be said that you answered as ice. As such, if worst comes to worst, I will accept full responsibility for your actions. You needn't worry. Estelle says, Killiker. Joshua says, I'm sorry, we've caused so much trouble for you. Killiker says, now then, Tita, since you're not a bracer, I have no authority over you, but are you truly set in your course? Tita says, yes ma'am, I am. Estelle asks, what? What's this all about? Joshua says, you don't mean... Tita says, I'm the only one who knows how to operate the device, so I'm going with you. Estelle says, what? Joshua says, well, it is a very complicated ornament. Tita says, I'm sorry, I don't want to cause any trouble, but I have to go too. Agate says, you gotta be shitting me. Listen, Pipsqueak, I ain't hearing this crap. What the hell are we supposed to do with a kid on a mission this dangerous, huh? Tita says, but you need me to operate the device. Agate says, then forget that idea. We'll find another way to sneak in. Estelle says, alright, enough. Lighten up. Why are you so damn stubborn? Agate asks, you want to run that by me again? Estelle says, Tita's ready and she said she wants to help, and her help will make it easier for us to sneak in. All that improves our chances of getting the professor out safely. I want to know why you're so against it now of all times. Agate says, you little... Have you even thought about her being a civilian and a kid besides, and you're okay with putting her in danger? Estelle says, I don't like it any more than you do, but we'll keep her safe. We're bracers, that's our job. Agate says, you sure talk a big game for a rookie. Joshua asks, and what does experience have to do with this? Bracers aren't the only ones who feel that some people are worth protecting. Isn't supporting that ideal what we're supposed to be all about? Tita says, Estelle, Joshua, Agate, I'm sorry that I make you so mad, but my grandpa is everything to me. All I want is for him to be okay, so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he is. Besides, you helped me when I needed it, so let me do the same for Estelle and Joshua, and for you. I swear that I'll be good, and I'll follow orders. Please, I'm begging you. Estelle says, oh sweetie. Joshua says, I didn't realize you'd put so much thought into this. Agate just shakes his head. I don't buy it. If you really want to help us that badly without getting in our way, then follow orders and stay here. Got it? But we really don't have any other way to get in there. I'd rather not do this. Truth be told, I can think of a few thousand things I'd rather do, but I'll let it slide this once. Dita says, thank you, Agate. Agate says, you've got no reason to thank me. You fall behind, you get left behind. Just so you know. Dita says, all right. Estelle pouts, I swear one of these days, by the goddess, you're a jerk. Why can't you just be nice and appreciate what she's saying? Joshua says, settle down, Estelle. He's just the type who speaks colourfully when he's embarrassed. It's a defence mechanism. Agate says, both of you got it. Tita laughs. Kilika laughs. Now, I trust that the matter has been settled. The Leeb will soon be ready to set off. When you are ready, please proceed to the airfield. Estelle says, will do. Agate says, later, Kilika, take care of talking with the army for us. Kilika says, I have appropriate responses lined up should they decide to question us. Aidos keep you. Please be careful. And we have reported the results of product testing. We received 200 monies and gained 4 BP. And we stay junior bracer 4th class. Yes, absolutely. All right. This seems like a good point to end the episode, just because I don't know how long it's going to be afterwards. So, yes, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next episode.